Yeah, welcome everyone to today's webinar on the topic of best practices for successful IoT journey, presented to you by IoT Analytics and by Libelium. Before we get started, just very briefly, we're planning this for 1 hour. We would like to leave a lot of time for Q&A, so if you have any questions, feel free to ask them in the Q&A section of this webinar tool. If you have any problems, let us know in the chat, and we will make a replay available for you in the coming days. And at the end, we'll ask you for your feedback so we can improve our webinars and get better. So today's speakers on the call, my name is Knud Lasse Lueth. I'm the CEO and founder at IoT Analytics. I've been looking at IoT for the last 7 or 8 years, but probably also longer. And with me today is Saverio Romeo, who is the author of the recently released white paper on this topic, and who I've been working with for a number of years now. And joining us today is also Alicia from Libellum. She has pioneered IoT when IoT wasn't even called IoT. Back in the days in 2006, I believe the company was founded, and she's based in Spain. And we've interacted actually a lot in different ways around IoT, and it's a nice opportunity today to talk about this topic of best practices with all these years of experience in IoT. And so just briefly, for those who don't know IoT Analytics, we are a market research company with the aim to help companies understand the market dynamics for IoT, AI, cloud, edge, and Industry 4.0, with reports and research services as our main product. And then I'll quickly hand over to Alicia to introduce Libelium.
Hi, Knud. Thanks for that. Well, welcome everyone to this joint webinar. For those that are not familiar with Libelium, I would say that it was, as Knud said, a company established 15 years ago when IoT was not even a term. And we started early in the value chain manufacturing hardware devices with a very horizontal perspective. Thanks to that, we've been exporting our technology to 140 different countries, and we are working in many different verticals, which is at the end of the day the credentials to have all the experience in many different verticals and geographies, and that's allow us to have the global vision that we are presenting today.
Great, thank you. So as a starting point for this webinar, if you haven't downloaded yet, we recently released a white paper on the topic of IoT best practices, and in it we discussed some of the IoT Analytics research lens on this, as well as the Libelium lens on some of the projects of Alicia and her colleagues, what they've seen over the last years. And so we'll be discussing some of that content, and feel free to ask any questions. At the same time, you can also download the paper. There's probably more in there as well. So as for the agenda for the day, I will do a quick start of where are we in the IoT and current market overview. And then I will rather moderate for Alicia and Saverio to come in, and they will share their perspective on the development of the paper and the research and the things they found along. So looking at IoT, just taking a little bit of a more bird's eye view, and you know, IoT means a lot of different things to a lot of different people, but really the term, when you look at the Google trend charts, took off in about 2014, had its peak in 18, so it's not necessarily from a general interest point of view growing anymore, but it's pretty much stabilized on a very high level. And along those years, in the early days, you know, we had these device management platforms that started to professionalize, that still exist, but I think that was one of the early innovations in IoT. When that term IoT was called IoT, there's also people that say, well, 30 years ago, there was still IoT, you just didn't call it that way. We had a whole new set of application enablement platforms join the market between 2014 and even 17. We recently had a release on that where we actually showed that now the number of IoT platforms is not growing anymore, but it has been for the last 7 or 8 years. which also includes the cloud-ready platforms. So if you just look at Amazon, was the first one to have a IoT services in 2015. Microsoft joined in 2016. This is actually not that long ago when you think about that. We have a ton of new low-power connectivity standards. They play a big role in what Libelium does as well. Not always for every setting. We also do a lot of work in factories, and their low-power standards are not that, although in some cases they can be. We saw the introduction of new AI tools, also driven by cloud providers and other software vendors. And it's really in the last 2 years been where AI has really taken off, also in the setting of IoT. We actually have a research release on that this week and next week, but we're not going to be discussing that today. The topic of digital twins has been very popular in many different ways, probably one of the most overhyped terms right now. Overhyped meaning overloaded, I mean to say, because it means a lot of different things to different people. Software containerization has been a game changer for a lot of software architectures. And more recently, looking at more powerful edge computing architectures, the integration of edge operating systems and cloud, and then also recently, the new wireless standards such as 5G or Wi-Fi 6. There's a few other ones that are quite interesting as well. And so we look at that, and that's kind of innovations for the last 7 years. There's more innovation that we recently talked about in another blog post on what is happening. If you look at the market now in 2021, we see a huge push to cloud migration to public and private cloud, but also modernization. So not necessarily only going to the cloud, but also moving from cloud hosted to cloud native applications and so on. Low code is starting to play a role because of the skill shortage that we're seeing in the market. There is a clear need to have the ability for people to use software without being an in-depth developer. Cybersecurity has always played a role, but it's playing a bigger role now, and it's becoming more important. And all the companies need to evaluate that. Then it's about, from an IoT point of view, an end-to-end solutions that are easy to configure, meaning all the way from the hardware to the application. And there's topics such as zero-touch provisioning and other kind of plug-and-play topics that are oftentimes still not solved. In many settings, IoT is not plug-and-play and probably will not be for the foreseeable future. But there's a lot of work happening on that. Open APIs and data ecosystems, data marketplaces play a huge role. Still some concern about data sharing, but it's a big topic. New edge solutions are popping up almost every day, both on the hardware and software side. And a new topic that is, well, not new, but something that has really accelerated in the last 2 years is sustainability and essentially the mix of IoT and how IoT can be helped for sustainability. We will look into that from a research, we'll write a research report later this year, later next year, I should say as well. And then lastly, AI, and specifically AI infused into existing software applications, which I think is often overlooked. A lot of existing software suites are adding features that are AI based. And so I don't want to spend too much time on this because this is not necessarily yet about IoT best practices, but we've seen that digital and IoT has been accelerating. And these are some quotes from earlier in the year. Obviously, current challenges in some parts of the world, but generally speaking, this topic has just taken off, and IoT is part of it. So we have our own market model for IoT. This is, to be very fair, we updated last May 2021, and we're currently undergoing the last calculations for 2021 actuals for the year. We saw a drop in 2020 due to COVID. It's reaccelerated in 2021, although probably not as much as showing here because it's yet a forecast, and because of chip shortage, supply uncertainties, and now reoccurring COVID uncertainty, things look a little bit less bright than it did half a year ago, but still accelerating market, especially in APAC and China, and very bright future for the next coming years ahead. And this is, driven by a lot of companies seeing ROI on their IoT initiatives, doubling down. So it's fair to say that IoT is not a developer playground anymore. Just a couple of examples. I don't want to spend too much time on this. Walmart is teamed up with Microsoft, for example, to connect all their refrigeration units on trucks. ThyssenKrupp is doing predictive maintenance on elevators. The port of Rotterdam is doing a ton with sensors and optimizing port operations. Volkswagen is the largest automaker, is teamed up with AWS to essentially connect all of their factories. PTC and John Deere have teamed up to make the John Deere agriculture equipment really smart. A company like Enel is doing AI on a lot of their smart grid and smart energy. And so all of these are examples of IoT. They are happening, they are real, and they are also quite different. But a couple of things that we are, from a research point of view, witnessing right now, pretty much all of these companies are doubling down on their IoT initiatives right now. And quite interestingly, we've had a survey recently that showed that those that invested early are actually investing more now than those that didn't invest early. So it's almost like there's a spread coming between those adopters that are adopting quickly and have been early and are now doing even more, and those that are still not investing as much. And the ROI, and I really want to stress this because there have been some studies out for a while that always say the IoT ROI is negative and it's not happening and so on. We just simply don't see that in the surveys and the discussions we have with end users. Predominantly positive. Amortization time under 2 years is often happening, at least for use cases, not necessarily for the underlying infrastructure, but that. And at the end of the day, they all struggle with complexity and missing skills. That is the theme. And yeah, I mean, with that, I want to go a little bit more into the topic of today, which is we want to look at IoT technology, we want to look at the project management, and we want to look at specifically some projects on the ground and best practices. So one more theoretical picture that I want to share, at least this is how we break down a generic IoT architecture, because I think it helps in facilitating our discussion here. We see it in 5 steps. I mean, the first one is the device or the edge. There's always some kind of edge infrastructure or components. You need some chips, you need sensors, you need other device components. And those make up either a smart device, which has an operating system, a powerful chip on board, or a more simple device that maybe doesn't have as much compute capacity and you're just running a smaller firmware. But you can still run applications on that. And running the applications is a big topic these days. You obviously have the connectivity. There's connectivity infrastructure, routers, base station, whether you use Wi-Fi or whether you use cellular, or whether you just connect the cable, you still need the infrastructure. A huge topic is the middleware, the platforms. Again, you need the infrastructure to run it. Compute, storage, networking equipment, wherever your data center sits, wherever that is all happening. But from an IoT point of view, you need a southbound data ingestion or egress. You need then that connects obviously to the devices. The data is stored, data lake, in some database, in a data warehouse. It gets analyzed. So whether it's business rules, whether you have advanced analytics on top. There is an app development element of that, and there is an app management development on the element on that, because the app also needs to be managed. There's a device management element, which is then connected to the actual devices, and the app stuff also connects to the edge, not only necessarily only up here. And there's a management element of that connectivity layer down here, which depending on what connectivity is used, is a bigger or smaller issue or topic. And then there is northbound, where it's about the API, the connections to your existing or new applications in the enterprise, and that then sits on top. And there again, it's the infrastructure. Where does that sit and what kind of server? And then it's either existing apps or new apps, and often that, in IoT, there's often new apps being built, and where they sit. And not to forget, all of that needs security. And so I just wanted to spend a minute, just outline that there's obviously different ways of looking at IoT architectures. There's always someone who can say, this doesn't fit us, you forgot that, or it doesn't make sense here. But IoT is a very wide term, and I think this at least summarizes a number of the implementations that we have seen. And with that, I would like to hand it over to Saverio to discuss how he sees the IoT project development, and then we'll get more into the discussion of how IoT projects actually develop.
Thank you, Knud. If you can allow me to open my video so they can also see my face in the audience. Thank you, the audience, for being with us and for being with me. So the idea here is Knud has given you the idea of the status of the market, of status of the adoption in the IoT. And on one side you see a kind of maturity level in certain organizations. You see the benefits that those organizations are getting. There are some other organizations, maybe the small, medium-sized organizations that are still struggling a little bit, but we are certainly far away from the 2006 when Libellum was established. And what we want to understand here was how these benefits can be achieved through the complexity the last slide showed by Knud illustrates. So we have an IoT solution that requires all a number of co-technological components to work together. What do we do? How do we develop these? And we came out with a sort of IoT solution development framework, and maybe Knud can slowly show the various phases. It's not that we came out really, something that you have seen before. In any case, we agreed a bit with Libellum in how these phases can be identified. In some other literature, you will find maybe a life cycle or some namings of the various phases in a different way. The idea here it was to bring together Knud IoT Analytics research into this matter and the real experience of Libellum, and see how the two things match, and see how Libellum does it in relation to maybe a more literature definition of the project development, of IoT project development. So we came with the first two blocks, like you can see on the picture, is when you want to try to identify, first of all, the financial resources necessary for implementing an IoT solution. And these also come from my personal experience with the public sector in implementing this type of things. You see, if Knud goes ahead, you see the circles coming. In a sense, is a continuous discussion between what to do and what money is available. And this is happening a lot in public sector, as we will discuss also with Alicia. Then we go on the solution design. There is a solution design phase in which we try to create what the solution could be, which are the objectives that the solution needs to achieve, what resources needs to be involved in this solution. Then we go in the POC, the proof of concept, starts to put our ideas, let's say, into reality. With initial proof of concept, maybe we'll have different proof of concept that needs to be assessed. And then we go on a testing phase. And the testing phase, somehow we have reached we like this solution. We like this way we are doing it. Let's pilot it. Let's see how it goes. And after the testing phase, there is, if you go ahead, we go towards the full deployment. We go toward the full deployment. We have our solution now is in the field. Maybe not in scale. Maybe we are scaling slowly. Maybe we need to reassess a little bit, but we go towards full deployment. And at the last step is the maintenance and the upgrade of the solution. And this maintenance and upgrade of the solution maybe can create a life cycle that maybe you see in some other literature when they talk about IoT project development. So this is sort of, I like to stress, this was a kind of agreed between me and using the research from IoT Analytics and Libellum and the Libellum team. So bring together something that was a bridge between the theory and the reality.
Very good. And let me try to bring in Alicia here to talk a little bit about the reality. So in your, I don't know how many projects you've actually done overall over the last 15 years, Alicia, but where are the critical elements, I guess, in these 7 steps that when you are going through these with your clients?
Well, I guess that the most critical point for us is between phases 4 and 5 in the proof of concept and pilot testing, and not because of its main challenges, not only, but also because that's the point where when companies start questioning the real purpose of their IoT project. Instead, on the contrary to what most of the people in the audience could think that should be done ahead, it's usually done in the proof of concept. And I'm going to give a very clear example of that. The problem is that sometimes companies carry on an IoT project to demonstrate a hypothesis they have. And for example, there's this IoT project endorsed by the marketing team of a big supermarket, super famous supermarket channel, which is located in all over Europe. And the marketing team wanted to promote, well, their online service. Buy online, use or delivery service, because we are the only ones that will ensure you receive your goods without breaking the cold chain. So that's you start the IoT project to demonstrate a previous hypothesis that you've never evaluated, but you want to use as a marketing claim. So the project started. They used temperature sensors in all the fridges inside the vans they were using to deliver the packages to their customers. But after a couple of months, they find out that that was not true. In fact, actually, the drivers were stopping the vans for longer stops than they were supposed to, and as a result, they were switching off the engine of the vehicles, and they were stopping the refrigerating systems. So as a result, they were breaking the cold chain. So in that moment, that supermarket had an opportunity to discover one problem. Sometimes problems are treasures because you have an opportunity to improve. But in that case, we have to remember that that was a project sponsored by marketing, and it had become an human resources problem, because you have to deal with the drivers. Maybe you had to talk to them and explain that they had been surveilled somehow with sensors during the past weeks. And the result was that they decided to kill the project because they just found the unexpected result. And I think this is a very real example, but it could be extended to many other projects. So when you start collecting data and you start checking the results that you were expecting, sometimes you need to be ready to find the unexpected.
Right. And so I think that's a really good example of showing in phases 4 and 5, it doesn't always go well, and you need to sometimes go a bit further. But I guess, Saverio, your experience is that also element 7 is often overlooked when it gets to that. Right?
Well, but, yeah, I mean, my experience in terms of implementations are at the moment in the last 3 years in the public sector in agriculture, and there is not much attention, I would say, into have a sort of life cycle observation strategy of your IoT solution. It kind of, you leave the IoT solution there and you believe that it works on its own without any sort of intervention, and therefore there is a lack of attention on number 7. And in the public sector, that leads then to block of existing IoT solutions. So if you think about it, block of taxpayer money, because then you need to go in a new procurement process to redo all the stuff. So, I think that is an important part in number 7, because leads then to the support to IoT solution that I think comes out quite strongly from this conversation, this research with Libellum, as an essential part in the offering of an IoT solution. So a support services that help the customers. You go with the customer hands to hand, and we can talk about this a bit more later.
Yeah, I can mirror that. I mean, that is not my view, not only happening in the public sector, it's also in some of the other areas that we cover, mostly in the industrial space. Even there, maintenance and system upgrades, just it's an afterthought when you start with your solution planning. And I guess we'll get to that a little bit later. I think it's a nice segue to the next topic, which is kind of goes towards the challenges. So we see these, we have these 7 now laid out. Let's move on to the challenges. And here again, first we're presenting some research highlights here. Saverio, take it away.
Yeah, and this is again let's say the research side of this white paper is IoT Analytics survey asking companies implementing, adopting the IoT, what are the challenges that they face into the IoT project development, and this they are ordering in the number of mentions, the number of response stressing a specific item, as you can see. You can see how like the top one is the inadequate POC testing, as also Alicia was highlighting before. The thing that I want to highlight into this, and if you show that, Knud, is that a lot of challenges are not really technological. A lot of challenges in the IoT are management-oriented challenges. And management challenges that they can, if solved, if faced, they can somehow solve the technological ones, not by magic, but create the right condition for addressing the technological challenges that an IoT architecture shows. And I think here you see all these, in my opinion, quite strongly into this slide. But it would be nice to listen also from the audience what they think. If maybe I'm overlooking the technological side of it for the management side.
We have a question from the audience that fits exactly into that, and I encourage everyone to send questions in real time. We'll not only wait for the Q&A, but we have a question which I immediately want to give to Alicia. Why do we have proof of concept phase? Can't we move directly from solution design to piloting is the question.
Well, that's a good question, and I think that you can blend both phases. But if you take into account that you have different objectives, so to me, when you are in the proof of concept phase, you are validating the solution architecture that you just designed in the previous phase. And you are demonstrating that this is the right technology, that you can connect this with that, and that all the communication is flowing the way it goes. In the pilot phase, you are looking for validating the business case. So you always start with a hypothesis, and you are validating the numbers. You expect to improve, to reduce cost. You expect to improve productivity, but it's not until you are really piloting when you have the real numbers. And many people think that those two phases are the same, and they underestimate the piloting phase. You cannot pilot and validate a business case with the size of a proof of concept. In the case of a proof of concept, maybe you are just connecting a couple of devices. If you really want to validate a pilot, you really need to make a more significant portion of the business to really be useful for your purpose.
I see a few more questions come, and thank you very much. I think this makes a ton of sense, and I can only mirror that, by the way. I mean, from a research point of view, I've looked at many case studies of different companies and different verticals, and every company that I look at separates those two phases, and like you just explained, does different things in these different phases. Just a small technical questions here. Which in this research, which verticals are represented? We have not said that yet. This is a very wide audience, ranging from manufacturing to energy to healthcare, retail. I think this is these are the 4 main verticals that are part of this research. And I also want to say in our webinars we often have very manufacturing heavy topics. This obviously, with a lot of the projects that we're discussing here today, are not so manufacturing. But I would say in this case, this applies to pretty much all of the IoT projects, because the challenges are somewhat common, and also the phases. And before I go to the next question, just quickly, Alicia, I wanted to because Saverio was kind of asking for your opinion of what he had just laid out. So I just wanted to see if you have anything else that you wanted to add to that.
Yeah, I just want to give some data. In the summer of 2019, we carry on our own survey from Libellum about IoT barriers, and top 5 barriers were all technical ones. All of them were related to mostly interoperability or technology immaturity. It was just, it seems it was ages ago, but it was just 2 years ago. And now I think it's important to remark that number 3 barrier is the internal stakeholder misalignment. And I think that driving cultural change, the right cultural change and IoT leadership inside the companies is, well, to me, it would be even the number 1 key challenge, in every organization.
And we have done different surveys and with different audiences. I think this one is the most broad audience that we've done it with, but what you're saying aligns completely with our research. We have other surveys, and I would add to that here number 5, a lack of internal knowledge, that has shown up as a or missing skills rather, has also shown up on the top in some other surveys as another very key challenge, which is probably only augmented right now with a skills gap that is coming up. Good. We have a few more questions coming in. We'll tackle them along the way. We'll move on to the next slide. There are some sample quotes from some of these surveys. So Saverio, if you do want to spend a minute or two, I don't want to spend too long because I think we still have a bit to cover and we have a bunch of questions coming in.
But these are quotes extracted by IoT Analytics work. So, and in my opinion, when I read them, and I read the work, and then I matched them with what I learned from Libellum, because I had a quite long conversation several times with the Libellum team. I can see, and also with Alicia now, I can see just a reinforcement of certain concept by the pilot testing phase, and it's becoming very important. You see 2 of them there, actually 3 of them there, and generally, again, I'm a fan of the management challenges. Let's put in this way, in a very simple way, and I can see here in this quote. Stressing even more these management challenges from organization here that are also very diverse in terms of sectors, as you can see, and also from large and small organizations. And again, I really feel the sense, as Alicia sense, of the need of IoT culture in organization in order to address then everything else. Everything else in some way can be faced if there is the right IoT culture in the organizations. And this is my way of reading these quotes. But IoT is multidisciplinary, is context aware. You can read it in a different way. And I hope the audience again carry on write questions there for us and comments.
Yeah. Let's quickly also move here and yeah.
Quickly here, and again here, I don't want to impose a model because being so contextually aware, the IoT, maybe everyone can have a different adjustments, but the idea here it was to take the development phase framework and to take the top 5 challenges that came from IoT analytics research, then you will see somehow also the challenges that Libellum is experiencing, and see how these challenges spread along this development phase, in which part are more relevant, in which part are more important to solve it. And here I want to again highlight, in my opinion, the number 5, for example, when we talk about the lack of internal knowledge, which goes back to the cultural issue, the management issue, which I experience all the time in smart city application, which I'm working on in smart agriculture applications. There are obviously the security one, or maybe Alicia wants to add something more on the security one, which is a topic that we always discuss, and it is important to discuss every time we talk about the IoT.
Yeah, and I think that I agree on how it should be addressed, but I disagree on the continuous line from phases 3 to 7 on the security considerations, because in our experience, security considerations are just a check. When you are planning the project, you are thinking of all the ticks that you need to fill, and security is highly considered. Then you start implementing the proof of concept and the pilot testing, and there is a gap. And usually you don't see all the security mechanisms working in proof of concepts. At the end of the day, it's like when you are visiting a pilot house, nobody starts the visit showing, oh, look at this door. It's the most secure in the market, and look at the lock. It's impossible to break into your house. No, you start the visit already inside the house and looking at the tiles and other things. It's exactly the same as it happens with the IoT projects. And there is a reason for that. And it's money, because it's cheaper and faster to develop a project without implementing all the security mechanisms in this phase. But there is a big risk of doing that. And the problem is that if you are not testing every single mechanism that needs to be in place in the full deployment, it's like if you are planning to fail almost. So I think that that's not totally aligned with reality here.
Great, disagreement is good.
We could go a bit deeper into security. Because we have some other questions, I would prefer to jump to that. If there are security questions in terms of how you ensure security and where you would do what, happy to pick those up as well. But we also want to talk about some more use cases. And before we do that, I just want to pick up one other question here. The question is, how do you show the return on investment and the value of IoT projects for those customers who are not familiar with IoT? And again, I'll redirect that directly to you, Alicia, because you have these discussions with potential customers all the time, I assume. Yeah.
Well, this is a very challenging part, and it's the reason why you see that loop in the two first phases of in the design process of an IoT project. Today, it's very difficult to find companies that have allocated a specific budget for IoT projects. On the contrary, most of them are either on the innovation or IT budgets. So they usually wait till the end of the year to make it whenever it is. Or they need to be created through savings in different department savings. And it means that most customers require ROIs that are shorter than 1 year, because that's the only way they can justify the investment. So right now, we've been working with customers and trying to, we've always tried to bring our expertise in what other customers have expected and have managed to give an idea about giving some benchmark on the industry to what and set up and help customers to set up the expectations. Now we are working on more sophisticated tools, and we are trying to create our own methodology to help customers to identify more specifically the savings that they can expect from the implementation of the project. But that's a project that we are working on right now, and will be out in 2022. So we think it's going to be very, very useful and very, very necessary as well.
Yeah, very good. And I mean, that sounds really great. I've seen some of these on some specific use cases for IoT. I've seen some. We've actually worked as well with some companies on ROI calculators for specific use cases, because sometimes it is possible to help discuss and also look at some research and look at, okay, what those that have already implemented it, what have they seen. I do want to add two other thoughts here. One is, it obviously depends on the vertical. If you're talking public sector, smart city, agriculture, it might be slightly more difficult. I've seen a lot in the manufacturing world. I see that there's a lot more data points on specific use cases available now that you can turn to from other companies. And I also think that as an end user, you sometimes need to distinguish between ROI for underlying technology. So if you are building a product and you are making it smart, you might have to put in some hardware. You might have to, build some software components. That is kind of the basis for everything else that you do afterwards. And some of these things don't have an ROI because they're the foundation for the rest. And some companies, in my understanding, are getting that and are investing in that strategically. And then the use cases come on top. And for those, when you have a clear use case on top of that, I see in many cases very quick ROIs, and often under 2 years. At least that's what executives from different companies that have implemented are telling me. But it's not for every use case in every vertical. I don't know, Saverio, if you also wanted to quickly add something.
Want to add that in the public sector, the definition of return needs to be very well defined. I would not talk about return, but we talk about more about benefits that the local authority can have, and those definition is difficult. And it's a benefit for who? Benefit for the citizen, benefit the business system, benefit for the local authority itself. So the ROI in smart city, or at least one I've experienced with, is quite tough to define and to prepare a local authority to that. I go back to the word culture. Well, education, training, mentoring. Yeah, I think those are very important there.
Good. Let's move to some of the cases. And Alicia, you yourself have looked at your own projects to look at what are the challenges your customers have faced, and you have some stories to tell based on that, right?
Yeah. So we have highlighted the key challenges that we have. So it may differ a little bit on the ones you found in the survey, because obviously you have a broader audience. But in the case of lack of technology assessment and testing issues, sometimes when you have such a horizontal company like Libellum, we have to expect devices to be in any scenario. And we need to be ready for almost everything. And many times we've seen that our products were not ready for some scenarios. And for example, I remember a project that was used in a project of a automotive project, and it was very, very demanding in terms of in electronic interferences. And thanks to that scenario of testing for our devices, we improved the project a lot. And I remember also many years ago when we had no 4G nor 3G connectivity in our devices, and we were using just GPRS. For example, we received an inquiry from a customer saying that they desperately needed 3G connectivity. And we said, well, this is IoT. You are sending very small packages of information. So why do you need such a high power protocol in place. And they said, well, that's not because we are sending lots of data. It's because we are locating the devices on top of a bus, and we are making a mobile sensor network. And thus, if the devices are mobile, they need to be they are using GPRS. They are disconnecting all the time. So what I want to say here is that once you go from lab to reality and start testing the projects, you identify many things that you've never think of, or that in theory were not necessary, but then where customers saw your reality. In the case of the absence of a solution maintenance strategy, something as stupid as taking into account that if you install sensor probes in a field, in a crop, you're not alone. So you have rodents that can damage the sensor probes. And well, have any of us thought about protecting the sensor probes against rodents bites? Certainly not till the moment that it became a reality. Or sometimes it's just a matter of living with expectations. And we've seen a lot, and we have to align lots of expectations with customers in many cases. So when we started back in 15 years ago, IoT was not even a term, but there was this idea of hardware. It was very, very commoditized, and anything should be priced as around 50 euros, including everything, batteries and connectivity and sensors and everything. And then as the IoT is evolving and becoming closer to the classical metrology solutions, there's a higher an increased demand for higher accuracy. And in some cases, and for example, dealing with customers of oil and gas projects, for example, they don't really understand the difference between the specs of very pricey and classical metrology systems and IoT. And we see here, coming into the public sector, and probably Saverio can give a story or two more. We are seeing this with the air quality projects as well. So you see the professional weather stations that are cost like 200 or 300,000 euros, that one city can afford one or maybe two, the biggest ones, and how the IoT is approaching that paradigm with low-cost sensors. But you need to consider that you are not gonna have exactly the same kind of data. You need to aim data that can be comparable, because your goal here is just to increase the capillarity of the network that you already have. So I think those are the most important stories that come to my mind when I see this summary.
Very good. I could have a ton of questions for you. I want to let the audience ask the questions, but you have, before we go there, maybe you want to spend 1 or 2 minutes, or maybe 3 or 4, talking about the actual projects that you've also included in today's session, and also in the white paper. Yeah, well, we have just 3 case studies that have been successful, but they are not beauty because they got successful after struggling a little bit. So in this case, we have an example of failing in the very early on in the 7 phases, particularly in the solution design. This was a smart parking project in the city of Huesca. That's a city located in the north of Zaragoza, where Libellum has its headquarters. And the problem was that they thought that they already have solved the connectivity and network for the project, but they haven't really
study the city map and the location of the sensors very thoroughly. So when we start placing all the devices, we immediately start struggling with connectivity problems. So some sensors were missing packages, some others were not really reaching to the application, and we need to go back to the initial phases and work with the customer to redesign the network, the whole network. In this case, they were using LoRaWAN, so we have to add a couple of more LoRaWAN base stations to cover all the city properly. In the next case study, we were using the same application, but instead of having a public sector customer, it was a facility, a big hotel in the city center of Madrid. In this case, well, the network deployment and planning, it's as you may imagine, much more easier, because it's totally, the challenges are totally different. But here we saw the problem and the challenges were very late on the deployment phases, particularly in the 7th phase of maintenance and upgrade. And well, we had the project up and running for a couple of weeks very well. Everyone was happy. This also happens in IoT as well. And suddenly we start identifying that that many of the devices were just running out of battery, and that was, of course, not expected at all, and nobody could understand why. So we went through a post-mortem analysis of the network, and we saw that the devices were continuously trying to locate the base station to make their connection out. And we finally found that it was disconnected. And that was because there was a maintenance worker found that device that was not a device that he was familiar with, and he just switched off the device. And it could be he didn't thought it was important, or he thought that was not supposed to be there. But the case is that that maintenance worker are very, very important for this for the success of the projects. And in this case, the consequences of not doing that was to uninstall the devices that have run out of battery, change the batteries, and get the project up and running again. And of course, that's supposed imagine if that happens in a city with thousands of devices installed already. So it's very, very important to align again, and this is like a common message throughout the webinar, to align every single stakeholder related to the project.
And I guess and educating them. Alicia, we have 7 minutes left. Can I suggest that we move to the questions that we have, because we have a few? Absolutely. Yeah. And feel free to ask more. So let me start in order as they appeared. In a sector as dynamic as IoT, do you see people holding up the implementation of projects because of fear of early obsolescence of a solution identified?
Well, it used to be that, and I remember that happening when in 2015 and 2016, when the low power wide area network protocols were introduced. But now I think that that the market is accepting that there's not going to be one single communication standard, and the market is more likely to accept that there will be some certain of obsolescence. So as a result of that, sometimes the consequence of this is that they are being more price sensitive, because they take into account in their models that they will need to maybe replace technology earlier than they expected.
Yeah, I have a similar experience, slightly different angle, but in a few years ago, it was like, you're not putting like, if you're a big corporate, you're not putting a startup on your IoT project. And they were like, you never know whether they're going to exist still for 2 or 3 years, in 2 or 3 years. But what I'm increasingly finding is that a lot of big corporates are teaming up with early stage startups for their IoT initiatives, and it's happening more and more. So I would answer it in a similar fashion, but with a slightly different nuance there. Let's move on. There's a question specifically for you, Alicia. In Libellum's experience, which verticals have benefited the most with the adoption of IoT over these years? Can you please tell some example projects to get a better understanding? So a big ask.
Well, yeah, a big one. So just to make it short, I would say that in the case of sustainability projects, as you've stated before, that's not a very easy question. It's not easy to identify the return on investment. I would say that the most clear cases that we've seen are related to agriculture or fish farming. And we have lots of use cases in our website if you are interested. But for example, I remember very quickly a dairy farm that using sensors and artificial intelligence algorithms found out that just feeding the cows in the right moment could help them to save up to 24-33% of the expenses in the food for the cows. At the same time that they were increasing by 18% the milk production. And we have many more examples, but that's just one.
Very good. I would encourage, I mean, we have a few more minutes, but my colleague Alicia has just in the chat inserted a link for feedback. So please, before you leave us, if it's not a lot, it's 1 minute, I promise. If you could just leave us feedback after this, that would be really nice. We'll move on. There's a few more interesting questions. We have the question, when should a company decide to have a fully fledged platform for their IoT initiatives, which is something I could talk about for a lot. I'll give you my quick take on that. I think you don't start with a fully fledged platform if you're a small company. If you're a big company, I see a lot of big corporates have now made the decision on specific platforms. That doesn't mean that these platforms are going to be there forever, but for at least the foreseeable next 1, 2, 3 years. At the end of the day, you need some kind of middleware layer that enables you these solutions. And a platform is a good starting point because it's modular. But you don't need to necessarily fully commit to one immediately. You have that as part of your POC or whatever. And I guess, Alicia, companies like Libelium offer platform services alongside some of your solutions that you offer, right?
Yes, and in fact, we are moving from being a hardware vendor to provide a platform development full solution for customers. And well, it's an exclusive I'm giving here that tomorrow we will be launching our cloud platform that will connect with our devices. And I think that it's a matter of coherence from our side. The market is demanding more integration and more easy to use solutions, not just devices or things. So considering also and taking into account that the next generation of our devices will be no code, just configurable. So very aligned with discussed today.
I didn't want to prompt you to make an early announcement here, Alicia, but that's great to hear.
Well, that's the benefit from for the audience here.
Great. We have 1 more minute. We will, for those who need to hop off now, we will stay on a few more minutes and tackle some of the remaining questions. And let me just reiterate: please leave your feedback download the white paper. and we will send a recording link in the coming days. But please do give us a couple of days. It's a very busy time right now. Yeah, let me see. There was another question on, and maybe I'll hand that to Saverio. First, how do you tackle the barrier of the initial budget of device purchase, which can slow down some IoT projects? Because I mean, you were talking earlier about difficulty in budgeting and business case development process.
Wow, what a question. I mean, in my experiences in again smart city and smart agriculture is, I mean, the barrier goes down when you illustrate why you should buy a specific device and a specific solution, what you want to achieve and how that specific device or that specific solution can help you to achieve that. And that require to do research with them, to illustrate to them the value potential solution and value potential partner that they can have. In my experience, we work a lot into consortium style. So you have the university guys working with the local authority, with the local startup, maybe with a company like Libellum that is more sophisticated, coming together, try to convince the head of the business development, the town hall, that they can do this and that in this way. So for me, it's a lot of conversation, it's a lot of narrative, it's a lot of demonstration, some sort of theoretical proof of concept, if you want, at the beginning. But I know that is very specific on smart city side. It's slightly maybe a bit different on the business side.
I want to give just an example I saw the other day from a large German automotive supplier, completely different approach. There it's essentially the central IT department, if you want, that makes that in that case makes a strategic decision to say, well, the underlying infrastructure, such as the first devices, that's budget that is made available to everyone in all the different units and plants and all these things that you can apply for. And this is kind of, you don't need to prove an ROI for that. It's a strategic thing. And then afterwards, you need to have your ROI. So I think the solution there is that the company has strategically decided to fund these initiatives without needing to demonstrate that ROI first.
Yeah. Can I have the comment on the previous question very quickly? When we talk about small, medium-sized enterprises and what do they do on the choice of IoT platform, I would also invite small, medium enterprises to look for support services. And I think for me, the end results of this exercise with Libellum was to see a company concentrated on that. Libellum opened their doors for me, metaphorically speaking. They showed me this Excel file in which they tracked their deployments and the problems they had, and all this the Pavlova that they went through in order to solve it. But they stayed with the customers until the end, even behind the end. And I think that is very useful. It's very powerful, very, very needed by the small companies that want to adopt IoT. Maybe the company we have in our slides, the big ones, not really, even so, also them. But I think for the small one, it's crucial to have a company who supports you, not just in the implementation.
Great words there, Saverio. My suggestion is we do one more question and then we wrap up. And this question, I think, is when I read it, I could be at the heart of Alicia. The question is, and I'm sorry, there's 2 or 3 questions that we won't get to then, and we'll try to get in touch with you afterwards. So this question is, for a project in which actual system users appreciate the benefits of the project, but the top management has failed to fully appreciate the fruits of the project, how would you proceed? So I guess it sounds like somebody is a hypothetical case where people love the IoT solutions, but top management is saying, not with us. Like, Alicia, any suggestions?
Well, I think that, well, in marketing, you persuade either by reducing the fear to risk and fail, or by increasing the benefits. In the case of IoT, you need to combine both things. So I think that if top management is not seeing clearly that the IoT is the way to go, they are probably in the laggard part of the innovation ball, and we have to talk in another language to those top management. We have to talk about how proven has it been, how many people equal in their industry is doing exactly the same, and why which are the credentials of the company that is joining us in that journey. So I think that's the most important thing, trying to align that you're gonna be isolated in your sector if you are missing the IoT train, because the other pairs in your sector are already doing that. So that's very important to get references. It's
more the highlighting the fear of being left alone rather than the benefits of being the leader.
Yeah, in those cases, I think it works better.
Yeah. It would be nice to understand if this manager talks about digital transformation, because if he's a manager who talks about digital transformation and then does not like the IoT, it means that he has not understood digital transformation, because it's about data, and the IoT is the backbone. We get the data, or the machine generating data, through the IoT, and then we do the digital transformation. Just a comment, maybe no, but
there's some great examples out there of companies that have achieved great things with digital and IoT, and my forecast is in the next 5 years we'll also see some great companies go under and fail because they haven't done it. But that's probably still to be seen in many ways. Good. I suggest we wrap it up here. Saverio, Alicia, I mean, Saverio, you already had almost your closing thought there just before. Alicia, is there anything in closing that you would like to say?
Well, I think that if you just need to remember one thing about this whole webinar, is that IoT projects start with people and with the management alignment. So we've been talking about this throughout all the webinar, and also look for a partner that it's experienced and has the credentials, because we've seen that it's all about having failed before. It's not about being the best one. It's about how many times have you failed before? So what's your experience? And I think that's the key to success.
Very good. Thank you. That's great closing words, and thank you everyone for attending. It's been a great session, great discussions. We could go on for longer. Maybe we will at some point in the future. Let's see what the next 15 years hold, or maybe 5 or just 2. Everyone enjoy the rest of your day. Tune into some more webinars coming your way, both from Libelium as IoT Analytics in the future, and stay in touch. We look forward to engaging with you, and for those whose questions couldn't be answered, we'll be in touch. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Bye.